When the plane climbs out and the seatbelt sign clicks off, most people relax. You think someone is always at the controls. That's comforting. It's also not the whole truth. Because there are moments the whole flight can turn on a single human. A pilot fainting. Not a horror movie scenario. A real, clinical blackout. It's rare, but it happens. And when it does, everything changes in a very specific order. First, what does passing out actually mean up there? At altitude, your body is under stress. Long hours, dehydration, low humidity, fatigue. A pilot can lose consciousness for non-medical reasons. It can be sudden, a sharp pain, a fainting spell, or a longer event, heart rhythm, stroke, seizure. None of these are automatic disasters, because commercial aviation designs for the exact moment a human is gone. Here's how. The airplane is not a one-human machine. It is a system of people, computers, and rules. Redundancy is the core word. If one pilot is incapacitated, the other pilot takes over. But that's only the first line of defense. Listen closely to what actually happens. Minute 0. The co-pilot notices. Maybe a twitch. Maybe a slump. Eyes glazing over. A hand drops. They call it out. "Captain, are you with me?" If the other pilot does not answer, the trained response is immediate and surgical. One pilot calls for help. The other stabilizes the aircraft. There is no hesitation, no dramatic fumbling. There is a checklist. It is drilled mercilessly in simulators. The first step is always safety of flight. You don't try to diagnose the person midair. You keep the plane flying straight and level. You declare an emergency. You call the company. You ask for medical guidance. Why so procedural? Because time is a currency. Every second spent guessing is a second not spent in control. Now imagine this. You are a passenger. You see a blur in the cockpit, a hand fall, and someone leave. Maybe you hear a terse voice over the PA. You feel the plane glide, change heading, begin a descent. It feels dramatic, but every action is deliberate. Next, automation. Autopilot isn't a villain in this story. It is the glue. If a pilot slumps, the other crew will usually have autopilot engaged. That keeps the plane stable. Autopilot can maintain altitude, heading, and even follow a programmed route. It buys time. Time for diagnosis. Time to plan a diversion. Time to get medical advice on the ground. Yes, the plane can stay airborne without an active pilot for a while. Not forever, but long enough to make rational decisions. Here's a detail most people miss. Commercial cockpits are designed for two, but they also assume the possibility of one. Systems, procedures, communications, all assume someone can become unavailable. That's why regulations require specific training on pilot incapacitation. And that's why airlines practice for it, over and over. Now, what about the cabin crew? Flight attendants are the next layer of defense. They are trained to identify a medical emergency, assist where possible, and maintain calm. They will lock the cockpit if asked. They will move passengers away to create space for medics when they land. And they'll secure the cabin for a possible rapid descent. This coordination looks chaotic up front, but it is a practice dance. Let's be honest for a second. People fear the worst. They imagine the pilot slumped over, the plane out of control, a scream, and then silence. That is not how it plays out. Here's the reality. Once a pilot becomes incapacitated, the co-pilot does about 3 things, in this order. 1. Fly the plane. Hands on controls. Stabilize. 2. Declare the emergency. Call ATC. Mayday. We have an incapacitated crew member. 3. Arrange diversion. Plan a descent and nearest airport. These steps are designed to reduce risk fast. And yes, they work. But there is a twist. Sometimes the incapacitated pilot's body blocks the controls or jams flight switches. Not often, but possible. In that case, the remaining pilot may need to manage a partially impaired cockpit. The training covers that, too. Simulators recreate scenarios where autopilot is lost and one pilot is unable to assist. It is ugly in practice, but the idea is simple. Always protect the plane first, then the people. Now the next big question people ask. What about remote assistance? Can ground doctors tell the pilot what to do? Yes. From the moment the medical emergency is declared, the pilots are in contact with operations centers and air traffic control. They can patch and medical advisors. But medicine can't always reverse a collapse. Often the decision is divert now. The goal becomes to get the plane on the ground where treatment is immediate. Here's something most viewers miss about the human element. Pilots are people with families and fears. They do not want the spotlight. They don't want to fail. That's why reporting of small medical problems is complicated. Pilots sometimes hide issues due to career fear. That cultural factor is real and has safety implications. So aviation systems compensate. Redundancy, monitoring, fatigue rules, medical exams. Now a short, sharp moment of terror, unresponsive pilot, single pilot cockpit over the ocean. This is the kind of scenario that makes headlines. It is rare, but when it happens, the system works as designed. Autopilot holds. ATC opens up a corridor. Nearby airports light the runway. A diversion is executed. Passengers are instructed. Emergency services are waiting. People on board are often surprised at how calm and procedural everything is. After landing, investigators and medical teams take over. They examine the incapacitated pilot. They assess for cause, cardiac, neurological, metabolic, or toxic. If it was something the airline can mitigate, procedures are updated. If it reveals a broader medical risk, regulators step in. This is how aviation learns. Every incident becomes data. Every checklist is refined. Another angle you'll find interesting: modern cockpits. An autopilot cannot interpret an ambiguous control jam as a human might, and it cannot replace two trained minds in critical decision-making. But automation reduces workload. It reduces stress. It extends time. That extension is the difference between a crisis and a manageable emergency. Now let's talk about passengers. What should you do if you suspect something's wrong up front? Simple. Stay calm. Follow crew instructions. Keep your seatbelt on. Do not crowd the galley. Do not try to enter the cockpit. The cockpit door is reinforced for a reason. It is an access control, not a trust test. If crew asks for volunteers with medical training, step forward. Otherwise, keep the cabin secure. Let trained people handle the situation. Here's a short example that sticks in pilots' minds. A mid-flight event. Co-pilot called for help. An off-duty doctor in row 12 stepped up. They assisted for a while. The plane diverted to the nearest airport. The crew landed normally. Everyone walked away. No drama. Just effective systems doing their job. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. If a pilot is incapacitated and the co-pilot is the less experienced of the two, the margin shrinks. That's why airlines manage crew pairings carefully. They avoid putting two rookies together on the same flight for that exact reason. Experience diversity is a safety feature. Pilots train for hours on simulators to get muscle memory for losing a colleague. They practice exactly what to say, exactly where to move their hands, exactly how to call ATC. That rehearsal matters more than you think. It reduces the cognitive load during a real event. Here's a pause-worthy fact. For most passengers, the single scariest moment is uncertainty. If you see crews moving with purpose, that purpose is your best signal. Calm people doing a checklist is a good outcome. Finally, what about policy and prevention? Modern airlines require regular medical checks. Pilots must report health problems. There are rules about hours on duty and rest. Fatigue mitigation is enforced, but the human element still matters. Aviation evolves because incidents happen and the system learns. That's how procedures become stricter. That's how new screening or training gets adopted. So what's the takeaway? This system is not perfect. Nothing involving humans ever is. But it's competent, it's deliberate, and it's constantly getting better. If you want the scary part again in one line, a single human can fail, but a system rarely does. That's the unspoken truth of aviation. You're not just on a plane. You're inside a machine built to absorb single points of failure. And that is why most flights end the same way they begin, quietly and without notice.